Child marriage is a human rights abuse that destroys almost every aspect of a girl's life. And it leads, in most cases, to really heartbreaking and devastating consequences.
Elizabeth Sider's 16 children are in foster care as she and her family face charges related to allegations of abuse and neglect. Was Elizabeth forced to get married? We're looking at forced marriages and the push to end child marriage in Ohio.
16 children, 18 births, and a marriage that should have never been legal in the first place. In 2008, a 15-year-old girl named Elizabeth crossed a state line to become a bride. Not because Ohio allowed it. It didn't. She was pregnant, she was a minor, and the only way around the law was to drive into West Virginia, where the rules were looser and nobody was asking too many questions. Her groom, Gary, was 18, old enough to sign a marriage certificate.
Elizabeth Siders was 15 when she got married. She was just a kid, but she was a kid who was pregnant with her first child back in 2008 when she and Gary Siders Jr., her current husband, traveled from Ohio to Mason County, West Virginia to get married. Gary and Elizabeth were married on March 31st, 2008. Elizabeth gave birth to a baby girl 2 months later, and 17 more children followed. I've told you many times that Elizabeth has been pregnant nearly every year since 2008. Gary and Elizabeth went to West Virginia to get married because legally, Elizabeth could not get married in Ohio at the age of 15. Gary was 18. It was illegal for her to get married in Ohio, but in West Virginia in 2008, Elizabeth could get married at 15 if her parents allowed it. Right now in Ohio, a 17-year-old girl can get married if a parent signs off on it and a court approves.
Old enough under Ohio law to be charged with a crime for what came before it. 17 years later, that marriage would end with 16 children pulled out of a house on Omar Street and 4 adults, Elizabeth, Gary, and Gary's parents, sitting in a regional jail, each facing 16 counts of child endangering.
Into an arranged marriage, but was able to get out of it finally. But back to Elizabeth and Gary Siders. Gary was 18, as I mentioned, when they got married in West Virginia. Elizabeth was 15. They're both in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, charged with 16 counts of child endangering. Gary's parents, Christina Lynn Siders and Gary Siders Sr., face the same exact charges. They've all pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. And the investigation into what was going on in the house.
16 counts, one for every child rescued from that home. This is the story of how a legal loophole in 2008 may have set the stage for a child endangering case unfolding in 2025, and how the state that let a 15-year-old get married is now the same state prosecuting the aftermath. Let's start with what we actually know. Elizabeth married Gary Sider Jr. on March 31st, 2008. She gave birth 2 months later. And then, almost like clockwork, she kept giving birth nearly every year for close to 2 decades. 18 children in total. 1 set of twins didn't survive. The 16 who did were eventually found living in conditions investigators are still trying to fully piece together. No consistent school enrollment, no clear paper trail. And according to the county prosecutor, allegations that the children were being deliberately hidden. Hidden. That's the word being used by law enforcement. Not overlooked, not forgotten.
Underway. Hidden. There are so many questions. Why were the children not sent to school? Why were they being hidden, as the county prosecutor has said? And why was Elizabeth marrying at 15 and then giving birth to children one after the other when she should have been in high school and going to prom? Was Elizabeth being abused? Elizabeth appears to have a bruise on her arm in the intake video. We don't know how she got that bruise. Was she a victim and didn't even know it? Her brother has said on Facebook that Elizabeth was indoctrinated into the Siders family. But what exactly does that mean? And
Here's where the legal term matters, and it's one you're going to hear a lot in this case: child endangering. Under Ohio law, that doesn't require proof of physical abuse. It can mean creating a substantial risk to a child's health or safety through neglect, failing to provide education, medical care, or a safe environment. 16 counts means prosecutors believe every single child in that house was put at risk, not 1 or 2, all 16. Now rewind to the beginning, because the marriage itself is where this gets uncomfortable. Elizabeth was 15. In Ohio, that's flatly illegal. No parent, no judge, no loophole gets you married at 15 in that state. But drive 1 county over into West Virginia in 2008, and the law was different. A 15-year-old could marry with parental permission. No judge required. No independent check on whether that consent was real, informed, or coerced.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk now just about this issue of teenagers getting married. You know, I've been digging into this topic quite a bit. And, you know, you read back like a century ago and things like that. You know, you read more in Appalachia about teenagers getting married. And usually it was because they were pregnant. But this was 2008. This isn't this isn't in the early 1900s, 1800s. This is not what we're dealing with here. So we have a 15-year-old girl who couldn't get married in the state of Ohio because it was against the law, so had to go on over to West Virginia. I mean, how serious of an issue, and why do you think this is important to not allow somebody who's 15 or 16 or even 17? Right now, a 17-year-old in the state of Ohio can get married with parental consent, and they have to jump through some other hoops. But why do you think that's so important from your vantage point to not allow this?
Yeah. And I'm sure, you like me, have heard other folks say, well, I know so-and-so got married at 16, 50 years ago, and they're still happily married. And it's like, okay, that's an exception that does not prove
So the question
rule.
isn't just what happened inside that house years later. The question is, how did a 15-year-old pregnant girl end up standing in front of an official in another state, signing paperwork that would legally bind her to an 18-year-old man with her parents' blessing?
I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that Elizabeth Siders, she was a 15-year-old girl when she got married. She couldn't legally marry in the state of Ohio, so they went over to West Virginia to get it done. She was pregnant. We're waiting to hear that, yes, she wanted this marriage. Like, she wanted Gary Jr. That's what her brother has indicated on Facebook. And he said she was indoctrinated into this family. We don't exactly know what that means. But even if a 15-year-old girl is 7 months pregnant and wants to marry somebody, I mean, do you consider that still a forced marriage?
Because here's the thing advocates want you to sit with when a minor is involved. Consent isn't as simple as a signature. A 15-year-old does not have the legal standing of an adult. She can't independently leave home. She can't get into a domestic violence shelter without a guardian's involvement. She can't retain her own attorney. She can't bring a legal action on her own behalf, which means, functionally, she cannot say no to a marriage her family wants her in. And if you cannot legally refuse something, you cannot legally consent to it either.
Forced marriage. Globally, any marriage in which even one party or both parties are under the age of 18 is recognized as forced marriage. It doesn't matter how mature or feisty or smart that minor might be. The fact is that you do not have the full rights of adulthood, all the legal rights, until age 18. And before you have the full rights of adulthood, I'm talking about basic rights like the right to leave home if your parent is planning an unwanted wedding for you, the right to get into a domestic violence shelter, retain an attorney, bring a legal action. Before you have these basic legal rights, you cannot say no to a marriage you don't want. You just cannot protect yourself from being forced to marry. That means you cannot give full, free consent to marriage. So by definition, that is a forced marriage. And forced marriage is a form of modern slavery. So we're talking about a really horrific situation. And it doesn't matter if a minor says yes. It's like statutory rape. We recognize that if a child is too young to consent to sex, even if they say yes, it's rape. Same thing with marriage. If you're too young to consent to marriage because you don't have the legal rights of adulthood, anytime someone is married before the age of 18, it is considered a forced marriage. And that's
not opinion. That's the framework organizations working on forced marriage use every single day, and it's the same logic underpinning statutory rape law. A minor's yes doesn't override the fact that the law has already decided they're not equipped to make that decision. So is Elizabeth a victim before she was ever a defendant? There's a bruise visible on her arm in intake footage from her arrest. Investigators haven't explained it. Her brother has posted publicly that she was, in his words, indoctrinated into the family she married into. Indoctrinated. That's a loaded word, and nobody involved has clarified exactly what he means by it. But it raises the uncomfortable possibility that the girl now facing 16 counts of child endangering may have spent her entire adult life inside a dynamic she never had the legal capacity to walk away from. This is the confrontation at the center of the case, and it's playing out in real time. Attorneys for 3 of the 4 defendants, Gary Sr., Christina, and Gary Jr., have already requested competency evaluations, questioning whether their clients are even fit to stand trial.
Attorneys for Gary Sr., Christina, and Gary Jr. have questioned whether their clients are competent to stand trial. Judge Rogers has approved requests from their attorneys for competency evaluations, so those will be conducted by an experienced forensic examiner. Now, the impact those examinations and the results will have on the case remains to be seen, but Judge Rogers said the exams needed to be conducted within 30 days.
A judge
If
has
you want to-
approved those evaluations, ordering them completed within 30 days. That's not a small development. If the court finds any of these defendants incompetent, the entire prosecution could stall or shift dramatically. Meanwhile, all four have pleaded not guilty to every charge. But zoom out from this one house, and you find something bigger and arguably more disturbing. This wasn't an isolated legal accident. It happened because the system let it happen. As of right now, dozens of states still allow some form of child marriage.
Stamped out. This really needs to become a relic of a bygone era. And frankly, if Ohio can stamp it out, and I've got all the confidence in the world that we can stomp this out in the rest of the country, where frankly there are states that you might be shocked, like California, which prides itself on being progressive, but they have no age floor in law. They do have some things saying, well, you have to have parental consent, so on and so forth, but no age minimum. California in 2026. This needs to change.
Ohio itself only bans marriage under 17. A 17-year-old can still marry today with parental consent and court approval.
When we first started realizing that child marriage was such a big problem in the United States in about 2015, child marriage was legal in all 50 states. But we've been going state by state, and to date, we've been able to help ban child marriage in 17 states and DC and 2 U.S. territories. And there is legislation pending now in Ohio so that Ohio can catch up to its neighbors. That Pennsylvania and every state going east, and north of that have banned child marriage. Ohio's being left behind and risks becoming the destination state where parents bring their kids to force them to marry after they've been raped and got pregnant.
West Virginia has since tightened its own law, raising the minimum age to 18 after years of allowing minors to marry with far less oversight. But that change came too late to stop what happened to Elizabeth.
Not allowed Elizabeth Siders to marry at age 15. Would this child endangering case be unfolding today? Back in 2023, West Virginia changed the state's law on marriage. Prior to that, 16 and 17-year-olds could marry with parental consent, and anyone younger than 16 could marry if a judge approved. Now you have to be 18 to get married, but the law now allows in West Virginia for a person who is 16 or 17 to get permission from parents, or they have to petition the court and affirm they're entering into a marriage voluntarily. Unchained at Last says 33 states allow some form of child marriage, meaning teens under 18 can marry. The states that have banned child marriage are in purple on this map. Other states like Ohio and Orange have strong bills pending. The other states on the map allow some form of child marriage.
Except creepy men who prey on high school girls. And it ends a human rights abuse. But legislators are refusing to vote on it. Is that okay?
And the stakes here go beyond one family's headline-grabbing case. Federal law doesn't set a minimum marriage age for immigration purposes. It defers entirely to whatever the state allows, which means in states where 17-year-olds can legally marry, that loophole has reportedly been exploited for something far darker than young love minors trafficked across borders under the legal cover of a marriage certificate. A federal Senate committee has already documented this pattern. The girl gets married. The man gets a path to citizenship. And on paper, it's completely legal.
Like human trafficking when these forced underage marriages occur.
Well, the federal government doesn't set a minimum age for spousal or fiancé visas. Instead, it defers to the law in the state where the couple will reside. And the law in Ohio says you can be entered into marriage at 17. So what that means is that girls age 17 in Ohio can legally be trafficked for their citizenship, dragged overseas, forced to marry an adult man who this lucky guy gets a visa and a path to citizenship. And also on the reverse side, men in Ohio can legally import a child bride of age 17 from any country around the world, sex traffic them to the U.S. under the guise of marriage, and it's legal because marriage at 17 is legal in Ohio. And the U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee issued a report showing thousands of teens are being trafficked under the guise of marriage because of this loophole in federal law combined with weak state laws like the one in Ohio. And almost all of these teens being trafficked under the guise of marriage are girls married to adult men. And the way that other states have addressed this really just horrific, unconscionable legal loophole is by
making
making
drawn zero public opposition in hearings. And it is still sitting there, waiting on a floor vote, while lawmakers debate hypotheticals that have nothing to do with the actual documented harm this loophole creates.
Why?
Yeah, it's so simple. I mean, you have to wait until 18 to enter into pretty much any other contract. Marriage is a contract. So why would this be treated differently? And as I said, there is legislation pending in Ohio. SB 341 would ban child marriage. It would make the marriage age 18, no exceptions, costs nothing, harms no one, ends what the US State Department calls a human rights abuse because of the devastating lifelong repercussions that marriage before 18 produces. And yet, legislators in Ohio, specifically senators, have refused to vote on SB 341. This bill has been languishing. It has only support from the public, not a single member of the public.
So here's the thesis, and it's not subtle. The system had 17 years and multiple chances to catch this. A truancy complaint was filed. It went nowhere. A judge in another state signed off on a marriage that never should have been possible. And now, after 16 children were found in conditions serious enough to warrant 16 separate charges, the state wants to talk about accountability, but only for the family, not for the loophole that made the marriage legal in the first place. If lawmakers actually believe child marriage is the human rights abuse they call it on camera, there's a bill sitting on a desk right now that would end it. No cost, no downside. Just a floor vote nobody seems willing to schedule. Watch this case. Watch that bill. And ask yourself why one is moving through the courts at full speed while the other has been sitting untouched for months.
Landing on the governor's desk.
Yeah, there's a couple things at play here. One, I do think this gets done. This General Assembly. Both leaders of the House and the Senate have said, look, we should pass this. It did pass out of committee unanimously, so it's awaiting a floor vote at this point. I will concede that we did get this dropped late. It's a high number for Senate bills at 341. I want to say we dropped this in February or March, which, the General Assembly can operate incredibly quickly if it wants to. But to me, I'm willing to give, the General Assembly certainly the benefit of the doubt with this, despite some of the concerns that were raised.